Hello and welcome to Top Story. In the race for the White House, whoever bags the first state wins the bounce. Sometimes the momentum takes you all the way to the US presidency. Two men have a spring in their step after the showdown in Iowa. Democratic Senator Barack Obama has beaten the longtime frontrunner Hillary Clinton, boosting his bid to become the first black president of the United States. In the Republican camp, folksy former Baptist preacher Mike Huckabee rules the roost. He fended off his main challenger, Mitt Romney, despite being heavily outspent. But everything can change. New Hampshire holds the next contest, and it doesn't vote in the same way as Iowa. And of course, there's Super Duper Tuesday next month, when more than 20 states make up their minds on the same day. Well, to take stock of the campaign so far, I'm joined now by Michael Oreskes, the executive editor of the International Herald Tribune. He's also a constitutional expert and author of The Genius of America, published a couple of months ago. Mr. Oreskes, thanks very much for being on Top Story.
Good morning.
Morning. Was it a surprising lead for Barack Obama?
Well, it was a strong victory, and certainly not a great evening for Hillary Clinton. But you have to remember what an eccentric process the Iowa caucuses are. Small numbers of people magnify into very large, seeming results. And the meaning of Iowa is not what actually happens in the caucuses. It is the meaning that we impose on it. It's what the media says about it. It's what the voters in subsequent states decide to do about it. So it's an event that the effect of it is much more important than anything that actually happens in it.
And of course, not that many people registered actually go to vote, and yet the turnout was very high this year.
I mean, Obama clearly demonstrated, for example, a great ability organizationally to get his people to come to these caucuses and vote. That's what produced this large percentage result in his defeat of Clinton. What that means for later votes really is up to the subsequent voters who then interpret it as they interpret it.
You think organization is really the key word for Obama, or was it also political issues, the fact that he played the black vote very carefully too?
Organization is crucial in Iowa, and it was clearly important both in Huckabee's victory and Obama's victory. It's also true that message matters. In Huckabee's case, the message, the sort of message of his being a Christian evangelical Baptist minister in his case, and Obama's message of change clearly resonated with voters. The question is, how many voters will it resonate in future primaries?
Before we get onto that, it's interesting that both Huckabee and Obama seem to satisfy a desire for change, because on the Republican side, Huckabee sets himself up against the so-called country club Republicans. He appeals to the working man.
Right. Huckabee is both a Baptist minister, as we said before, and the governor of a middle state, Arkansas, a nearby state to Iowa, and he resonated very well with the Iowa voter, just as Pat Robertson, another minister, did very well in the 1988 Iowa caucus. Bear in mind, Pat Robertson went nowhere after that vote.
How serious is this reverse for Hillary Clinton? Will her machine kick in now?
It will certainly kick in. They will certainly fight. It's a setback. It's not helpful to her. On the other hand, her husband lost in Iowa and went on to become president of the United States. George Herbert Walker Bush lost in Iowa and went on to become the Republican nominee and the first Bush president of the United States. So you can lose in Iowa and come back. It doesn't eliminate you necessarily. There are some people who were eliminated last night, but Hillary Clinton's not one of them.
Well, one of the people who might be eliminated in the next stage is John Edwards, even though he came second. A good result for him. He doesn't have the financing of his challenges, though.
Right. He's got a tough problem right now because he's kind of caught between Obama and Hillary. The big question in New Hampshire, Hillary is depending on New Hampshire as a kind of firewall, as they like to call it. And Obama will probably do very well in New Hampshire because he's beginning to show that he can attract independent voters. And New Hampshire is an entirely different place, both in terms of the nature of the voters and the nature of the process. And in New Hampshire, voters from independent ranks can vote in either primary. So, for example, John McCain may benefit in New Hampshire, and Obama may benefit in New Hampshire from the ability of people to join in the party primaries. And so that may leave Edwards as a kind of third wheel.
And how does New Hampshire really vary in the issues from Iowa? Is there a really significant change?
Yeah, it's a very different place. It's a New England anti-tax state. There are very few evangelical Christian voters in New Hampshire. There are very many in Iowa, so that will make Huckabee's climb in New Hampshire very high, and one would not expect him to perform particularly well in New
John
Hampshire.
McCain in the polls is not doing too badly in New Hampshire. In fact, he didn't do badly in Iowa, 13%, considering he didn't even bother with the state.
In the strange ways of the American presidential selection process, the big winner on the Republican side of the Iowa caucuses may well be John McCain, because what Huckabee did was slow down Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, a former governor of Massachusetts, would be expected to do very well in New Hampshire. But if he's wounded now by the fight with Huckabee in Iowa, that may give McCain an opportunity to do very well or possibly even win the New Hampshire primary. So it sounds perverse, but that could be the real outcome here.
And Giuliani, only 4%, but a similar figure to what Bill Clinton got in '92. That didn't do him any harm.
Right, and we'll see. The Clinton comeback clearly shows that Iowa doesn't necessarily rule the roost. Giuliani followed a strategy which he was explicit about. He said, I'm not worrying about Iowa. I'm going to go for the big primaries later. There are a lot of signs that the Giuliani campaign is fading, but nobody in these big states has voted yet. Giuliani's counting on doing well in the big states to come.
Now, in terms of Iowa, have any real themes emerged in what other states will deal with? What issues have really come to the fore? I mean, the economy is obviously one important thing.
I think the most interesting thing that became apparent in the last few weeks in Iowa was that the Iraq War is less important as an issue to Americans, certainly to Americans in Iowa, but I think more broadly to Americans than some other issues. The economy, most importantly, health care, housing, the sort of personal livelihood issues are clearly becoming more important, and Iraq, as the violence subsides, is becoming less important to American voters. That was clearly visible in Iowa. I'd expect we'd see that as we go forward now.
And which candidates do you think that could benefit that?
Well, it could help McCain, for example, because McCain obviously was a strong supporter of the war, and that was a big problem for him earlier. But if the war becomes less important, maybe that helps McCain. It might actually help Hillary recover, too, because her strong support of the war early on was a real problem for her among Democratic voters who are very anti-Iraq war. But if the war is less important, maybe it will help Hillary to recover.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that analysis. Michael Oreskes from the International Herald Tribune. Of course, we'll be following the US elections closely for you here on France 24. Do join us for another edition of Top Story on Monday morning.